Welcome to r/pro revenge, where a food thief gets fired in more ways than one. Our next Reddit post is from Frau V. Until April this year, my husband, Mike, worked in a warehouse for a big international furniture company in southern Germany. He liked the work, even if it was hard labor carrying 150 kilograms, or 330 pounds for the Americans, pieces of furniture around. Because of this, the staff turnover was pretty high. One of his colleagues, Steve, started at the same time as my husband. They were not friends, as my husband Mike didn't like him, but he respected him as a hard worker. Due to customers coming in all the time, the warehouse staff didn't have required breaks. They just took their lunch break when it was possible. Some used the break room with a basic kitchen. Some went out to eat, go to the supermarket on the other side of the road, or did errands in the 60 minutes they had. But either way, you had to clock out and back in. Soon, people realized that lunches they had brought in went missing from the fridge in the break room, as did sweets and drinks. Since it was rare that two of the workers took their breaks at the same time, no one was sure who stole them. They also weren't allowed to bring up a camera. So Mike and the warehouse manager decided to take matters into their own hands. Once in a while, when it was slow, they decided to order food. Mostly pizza, sometimes burgers. And my husband loves hot, spicy food. I'm actually pretty sure that he doesn't have blood, he just has hot sauce flowing around. Anyways, we have a nice assortment of powders and sauces, ranging from a little tickling to, "This will turn your butthole into a Johnny Cash song if you don't get that surgically removed right now." My husband, of course, had some of these sauces at work. You all know where this is heading, right? When the thefts got more and more regular, they decided to order pizza, just Mike and the manager. The others didn't want to order pizza or had something else. The pizzas got delivered and smelled delicious. Miraculously, both my husband and his manager were able to take their lunch at the same time and enjoyed their pizza, but didn't finish everything. Mike took out one of his sauces with a scorching 2 million Scoville. For those not familiar, regular Tabasco has about 5,000 Scoville. And he distributed a generous amount on the leftovers, which blended in great with the red tomato sauce. They then left to have a smoke and continue working. They hadn't had a chance to clock in again when Steve emerged from the break room, running to the bathroom, hid a very nice shade of red, gagging. When he came back out a few minutes later, he was white as a sheet, reeking of vomit, and left without a word to get something to drink from the supermarket. Just then, the local store manager, the boss of the warehouse manager, happened to drop by. He noticed that Steve was absent and did not clock out. A big no-no. What nobody knew is Steve already had 2 write-ups for being absent without clocking out. If you get 3 write-ups, which is called an Abmahnung in German, for the very same reason, you can be terminated without notice. When Steve returned, clutching 3 packs of milk closely to his chest, the 3rd write-up and termination was already printed and ready to be signed. Steve left immediately. He now works in another warehouse, where a good friend of mine is employed too. None of their food has gone missing yet. The top comment from Unilateral Withdrawal: "Revenge is a dish best served hot and spicy." Our next Reddit post is from Emu Funny. Many of you have probably heard of families with strong hierarchy structure, normally with the eldest in the family having the most influence. My family is one of them, except that my parents are drug addict deadbeats, so my eldest sister, who's 31, raised all 5 of us. She's the boss of the family. She says jump, everyone says how high. The focal point of this story is my youngest sister, who's 20. Most of us have a handful or at least a couple of memories with our mother before she lost everything. Except for our little sister. For her, our big sister is the only mother she ever had, and our big sister knows how to take advantage of that. All of us noped out of our parents' house as soon as we turned 18, except for our oldest sister, who waited until our little sister and our brother were raised and in their mid-teens to move across the country. Little sister begged for years to move in with big sister, but big sister always denied, saying that someone had to take care of our father. And because she and her new husband needed privacy and space. That was until big sister got pregnant. She got little sister to move in with her, and she's been there for the past 2.5 years, helping out. Big sister's family wanted to visit for a couple of weeks, so little sister had to stay with me for that time so they could use her room. One day, she saw me studying for my master's degree and said something about how she always wanted to go to college, and this is how she went. I said, "So why don't you go to college?" My little sister said, "Oh, I talked to our big sister about it, but she said that not everyone is the college type, and that I wouldn't have time to work, study, and take care of my niece at the same time. And it's expensive. Most people work and study at the same time, and she can put my niece in a daycare. I'm sure it wouldn't be that much more expensive than what she's already paying you." "She doesn't pay me. She already gives me food and shelter, and if I need money, I just take a shift at work." And this is how I learned that my sister was not only babysitting, but also cleaning the whole house for free every day. She was even only working 8 hours a week at her normal job because she was too busy taking care of our niece. Long story short, it took me 2 weeks to convince her to apply to community college, and then more weeks on the actual process. But she finally got confirmation she would start in September. All of that behind our older sister's back. She was planning on telling everyone the next time we all got together, which would be Independence Day. But before that could happen, Big Sister got everyone together at her house to announce that she was pregnant. Little Sister starts crying because now she wouldn't be allowed to go to college. Big Sister gets deeply hurt and offended that she planned this behind her back. I butt in and the other siblings butt in. It's just generally a mess. Older sister said, "How could you do this to me? Who's going to take care of the babies? I can't believe you'd be so selfish. If you like OP so much, go stay with her." Those were just some of the things she said. She kicked me and little sister out, who stayed with me until they made peace. Both of our siblings reached out, one to say that I should have minded my own business, and the other to tell me that she was on my side, but wouldn't say anything. After that, little sister moved back in with big sister and didn't go to college. But they agreed that she would get paid $6 an hour and would be allowed to take more shifts at her job until the baby was born, and then go to a real college after the child turns 1 year old. I know it's messed up, but all of them, especially little sister, worshipped our older sister like a god. I waited a year to act out my revenge, making sure my sister had saved enough money to live on her own. First, I researched the legality of paying a homeless person in food and shelter. In US, depending on the state, it's legal as long as you don't cross the line and the person becomes an employee. For example, you can give the person a list of tasks you want done. However, you can't say that it has to be done in a certain amount of time. You also can't request that someone be somewhere at a certain time. You can ask, but not demand on the time. It comes down to word choice. Also, you have to comply with rental laws. If your local laws say that you must give 30 days notice to a tenant, then you must give 30 days notice to this person as well. I had proof of all this, including several screenshots of older sister admitting to not paying and not allowing little sister to move out or get a job, and also admitting to kicking her out whenever she wanted. All this technically seemed worthless since no one would sue older sister, but that didn't matter. I just wanted to make sure that her boss knew that if she were to be sued, it would be a sure case. Big sister works for a civil rights attorney's office, so discovering that she has a literal modern-day slave would probably get her fired. So what did I do? Big sister was always complaining about one of the bosses at her job that hated her and had tried to get her fired for ages. I went to the company's site, found the woman, and then found her Instagram and Facebook. There, she had a post tagging her yoga studio. I went to that studio and created my membership. It took a few weeks of trial and error trying to find exactly what class Ashley belonged to, but I finally found her. Then I went to yoga class every Tuesday and Friday at 8 a.m. for months, slowly building a friendship with her. Around 3 months in, she asked to follow me on Instagram, and I was always prepared for this scenario, having deleted the few pictures I had with my big sister. After 9 months, when our friendship was a strong baby, I brought up the crazy coincidence that I found out that she worked with my big sister. Before things could get awkward, I said, "It's ironic that she works for civil rights, considering, everything." That got the coworker's attention. I told her everything, showed her every screenshot. I could practically see her eyes shining. They had their own history that's not important to the story. All you need to know is that my big sister is a B-word. Her coworker wanted revenge as much as I did. I told the coworker about little sister's situation and why big sister couldn't ever know about this. This is why being friends with Ashley was so important. If I had just sent them the proof and explained the situation, they would have probably just ignored it, since this was a very legitimate reason to fire her, and they wouldn't risk firing her for a minor mistake and maybe getting sued. I sent the coworker the files with the promise that my big sister wouldn't hear about this, but she needed it to convince the other owner, who was the reason why she wasn't fired yet. 2 months later, big sister was fired for minor mistakes, lateness, and general bad productivity. A small victory, sure, but I loved coming to visit her during the 4 months that she was unemployed. She was looking so tired and miserable all the time since she had no money to pay for a babysitter, and little sister was away at college. So she actually had to take care of her own kids. Our next Reddit post is from Aaron Sky. I am a dry liner, which means I do a lot of moving around for my trade, as most of the work I do is towards the end of most projects. That means that I spend a lot of my time renting flats and houses for only short periods, usually about 6 months at a time. This has meant that I've had to deal with a lot of landlords over the years, both good and bad. When it comes to bad landlords, I'll normally just walk away and get on with moving to the next job and take the loss of my deposit and never use them again if I'm working in that area in the future. But this particular landlord bothered me so badly that I was not just going to walk away. I had managed to get myself onto a big job in London working at the new Wembley Stadium, so I decided I would look for a house for rent rather than as a flat, as I knew that I'd be working on this for a while, and I found a reasonably priced house to rent from a private landlord in a local newspaper. I gave him a call and meet him later that day. He seemed okay. We went to view the house, I paid him the deposit in cash, and I moved in that weekend. I ended up staying in that house for nearly a year with no problems. I always paid the rent into his bank account on time, and I fixed any small problems that might crop up with the house myself without bothering him. When it came time to move out, I'd only ever spoken to him twice on the phone after there was an issue with the heating that I was unable to fix myself, and he sent an engineer around the next day to fix the boiler. So when the job was finishing, I went round to a pawn shop that he owned to give him notice that I'd be moving out the following month, and to let him know that I was happy for him to come around and inspect the house before I moved out so that I could get my deposit back from him when I returned the keys. He never came around while I was in to inspect the house, so I assumed that he just came around and let himself in while I was at work, as I told him that I had no issue with him doing that if need be. So on the day that I moved out, I went around to the pawn shop and handed him his keys back and asked for my deposit. His response was, "What deposit?" I replied, "The month's rent that I gave you in advance of moving in as a security deposit." He then told me that he was keeping that to cover the cost of repairing damages caused while I was living in that property. I responded, "What damages?" With all the bits of work and decorating I'd done on the house, it was in a better state now than when I'd moved into it. His response was to step forward and get right up into my face and say, "You're not getting it back, so F off." And he then gave me a shove, which forced me to take 3 steps back to avoid falling on my butt. Now, I'm what you would classify as an average size and build guy, and this landlord had a good 4 inches on me height-wise, and obviously spent some time down at the gym. So I thought that it was wise to back away and cut my losses. Now, before I was a builder, I was a member of the British Army in a regiment called the Royal Green Jackets, and they trained us that the best way to proceed when confronted with aggression is to meet it swiftly and with much more violent aggression. So, without even thinking about it, I started to move forward with the full intention of dropping this douchebag quickly and painfully. After the first step through, a thought popped into my head like a bolt from the blue. So I stopped, took a moment to examine the idea from a few different angles, said, "Okay, bye," to my now ex-landlord and walked out of his shop. What the landlord didn't know was that I had a spare backdoor key cut when I lived in the house, which I'd stashed in my van in case I ever lost the keys so I could get back in. So later that evening, I let myself back in and decided to stop for one last night before leaving in the morning for my next job, which was in Scotland. I spent the last night in the house carefully removing every bit of wood in the house. I took down doors, skirting boards, banisters, architrave and floorboards, being extremely careful not to damage anything. I also dismantled all the kitchen units and took up the wood flooring and carpets. I then left everything in nice, neat piles in each room. I got in my van the next morning and was preparing to start my drive when I decided I wanted to rub a little more salt into my ex-landlord's wounds. So I stopped at his shop on the way out of London, got a spare hammer, screwdriver, bag of nails, and box of wood screws out the back of my van and went into the shop. My ex-landlord wasn't there. probably for the best. So I left these tools with his confused-looking assistant and told her to tell her boss, "You'll be needing these," and left for my drive north. I had my phone switched off while driving, and a few hours later, while I was having a bite to eat in a service station up by Nottingham, I decided to switch it back on. And I was greeted by a string of text messages and some very colorful voice messages which left me chuckling to myself. I did reply to one of the texts that he sent me. The text was, "Do you think you're effing funny leaving me nails and screws?" I responded, "Yes." The whole point of a security deposit is to encourage the tenant to not damage the property. But if you decide to just screw them out of the security deposit, then they have no incentive whatsoever to treat your property with respect. This landlord really shot himself in the foot. That was r/pro revenge, and if you like this content, check out my podcast where I publish the exact same episodes. Also, hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit videos every single day.